Hello, my name is GabrielleBoutte8, and this is my Evolution Assignment 1 project. In The Origin of Species, Darwin begins by writing about his time aboard the HMS Beagle. While on his 5-year journey, he makes observations about species inhabiting South America and develops a theory on the origin of species. Darwin expresses in his writing that it may be imperfect, but he's deciding to publish it due to the fact that he's sick. I just like to imagine that this is Darwin's wife, Emma Darwin, though I don't know if Darwin was in a wheelchair. I just like the little picture. But he's also writing due to the fact that a naturalist by the name of Alfred Wallace actually came up with the same ideas regarding common ancestry that Darwin had been working on. Darwin expresses doubt in the perfection of his theory and leaves room for questioning, though he states, "I have not been hasty in coming to a decision," and supports his claims with his experiments and observations. Toward the end of the introduction, Darwin introduces the idea of natural selection, calling it the main meat of modification. Many naturalists claim that external conditions are the only cause for variation in species. Darwin repeatedly denies this idea, calling it preposterous, and lists topics to be covered in his abstract. These topics support his idea of mutable species. Chapter 1, Variation under Domestication. In his first chapter, Darwin notes that domesticated plants and animals of any particular species vary amongst each other much more than they do in the wild. He mentions a few beliefs as to the cause of this variation. It was believed that these variations could be due to the fact that domestic life doesn't always mimic life in nature. Domestic life and wildlife commonly differ in their environments, with domestic life providing for access to more food and also variations in heat, light, and moisture. That was straight from Natural Conditions, and Darwin actually doesn't really like this theory as he says that it can't be the sole source of variation. He states that if this were true, then linear change in organisms due to a changing environment would be evident. Instead, he proposes that there is variation between parent and offspring. This variation may be strong enough to be passed to further generations, leading to a more prominent variation. And he called this idea indefinite variability. Darwin goes on to describe variability in domesticated pigeons, agreeing with the idea of many naturalists that all pigeons descend from the rock pigeon. He writes that when he performed a cross of two species of pigeons lacking the rock pigeon's characters, the offspring occasionally contain these characters not expressed in the parents. Darwin believes that domesticated varied species all originate from one common ancestor. This is the rock pigeon that Darwin was talking about, and a fun fact is that whenever I was trying to find a picture of this, I felt like a lot of the rock pigeons kind of looked a little bit different. So I feel like that just kind of further gives example to Darwin's theory of the rock pigeons. Scientific progress made on subject matter discussed in Chapter 1, Variation under Domestication. Darwin's idea was that domestication led to a transformation of species, but this had to do not only with changing environmental factors, but sexual reproduction as well. He explained that plants and animals could inherit variation from their parent cross, but he characterized inheritance by phenotype as he did not have any knowledge of genes or their function. Though Darwin knew that his lack of explanation for heredity left a large gap in his theory, his idea that somehow phenotypic variations are passed down from parent to offspring via sexual reproduction opened the door for many other large discoveries. In class, we've learned of Mendelian genetics and the idea that genes are passed down from generation to generation, never leaving the genome, but sometimes hiding and reappearing over the course of generations. Of course, Darwin didn't know the mechanism of heredity, and this discovery filled the hole in his theory. Whereas Darwin thought that species varied over time, straying away from the original type, Mendel believed that characteristics of species remained constant. Following Darwin and Mendel's discoveries, cytogenetics took off, allowing for a major expansion in knowledge of heredity. This is just a I just had to add this picture in here. There's no explanation for it. Okay, cytogenetics. It appeared in 1902 when Walter Sutton, an American geneticist, concluded that meiotic segregation of chromosomes of the male insect Brachiostola followed by it followed the segregation rules that Mendel outlined in his abstract about inheritance. He published a paper arguing that chromosomes occurred in matched pairs, with one chromosome from each pair originating from that organism's parents. In 1903, he expanded his theory to conclude that each pair of chromosomes segregates during the production of sex cells by meiosis. In other words, each sex cell or gamete contains a full set of unpaired chromosomes. He said that during meiosis, the paired chromosomes aligned randomly and separated. This means that each gamete would contain a random assortment of maternal and parental chromosomes. This explains Mendel's principle of independent assortment. All of this led up to discoveries by people such as Carl Sachs. Carl Sachs was an American botanist and geneticist who released a report quantitating trait linkage in seeds by using a marker to label chromosomes and analyze linkage between quantitative and major genes. This detection of genes controlling phenotypic traits by segregating marker genes and analyzing quantitative variation led to further discovery regarding modern ideas of inheritance. What scientists J.B.S. Haldane and Herman Miller discovered less than 10 years later by studying singular cells is that perhaps new gene function may emerge from readjusted copies of old genes. For the first time, this introduced that the reorganization of genes during duplication may be important for the arisal of new genes. The early idea that duplicated genes are the cause for the emergence of new genes and perhaps phenotypic adaptation has been confirmed and refined over the years. Darwin had a lot to say in chapter 14, Mutual Affinities of Organic Beings, but I kind of summarized it to 3 points. So he starts by expressing his problems with the classification system. He believes that it's limiting and claims that it doesn't allow for distinguishment between species and variety. Though he doesn't particularly like the classification system, he does say that it's useful and just proposes that it be modified. He then summarizes his theory of natural selection and the main points of his argument, admitting that his theory contains gaps, though he emphasizes that he has thoroughly explained his theory and leaves room for further improvements. He acknowledges the importance of studying embryos to further understand development. He also expresses his wonder as to why many naturalists and geologists don't accept his theory of mutable species. He doesn't believe that the rejection of his ideas is due to lack of his credibility or lack of scientific evidence. He basically just sums it up to say that they're being stubborn, and he credits the lack of acknowledgement from others in his field due to their unwillingness to believe that species descended from another. He also thinks that many naturalists are not able to grasp the fact that evolution happened over a long time, and that kind of throws them off. They don't, I guess, a lot of people at this time period didn't really think that the Earth was that old. Darwin claims that they're not open to new ideas, and they only want to expand upon the knowledge they already believe to be true. And here are my citations. Thank you.